Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about cloud computing at Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security. And David, I'm going to throw it over to you. Deloitte's in a unique situation there where they're working with a variety of agencies on a variety of technologies, including all kinds of cloud service providers, et cetera. Give us a state of the state from where you stand and what you're seeing out there.
Sure.
Your customers are asking you to implement.
So I'm a software architect by training and work. So I spend most of my time working with our customers on how they're using the cloud, right? In terms of designing software systems, cloud native, those kinds of things. Theme for the day, I think, and the theme for the year that I've seen is platforms. Enterprises are moving to, they want to use the SaaS platforms and the PaaS platforms that are being, Jonathan just described ServiceNow's and the use cases he's building out in ServiceNow. The use of many of those platforms, whether that's ServiceNow or Appian or Salesforce or whatever, is very valuable to agencies. There are potential issues with that, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to design software architectures to help agencies kind of prevent those issues, particularly around stovepipes, for lack of a better word, right? There's a word from way back when, right? So as I'm putting business functions into Salesforce and I'm putting business functions into ServiceNow and I'm putting business functions in these other platforms, how do I get kind of a holistic view of the things that are happening across them from my enterprise's perspective? So we talk to clients about, having them define what are the important business events and important business data that is being created and manipulated in these platforms, and having some sort of kind of technology that they can get the exhaust from those platforms or the telemetry out of those platforms into a single kind of view of what's happening across their enterprise. So once they're able to do that, then they can, it's easy to adopt another one when it comes out, or it's easy to say, hey, this use case that we're talking about belongs in ServiceNow or belongs in Salesforce based upon, those systems capabilities. The second kind of platforms that we're talking to customers about is really when we get the question of, hey, how do I stay agnostic? I'm going to air quote that across CSPs and across cloud.
Avoid the lock-in, right?
The lock-in, yeah. And I don't know, we'll see over time how much of an issue that actually is. But what we're starting to see and we're starting to recommend users is to stick with open platforms. And what do I mean by that? I mean things like a Kubernetes runtime environment or a Kafka integration environment. The reason being is that things that you build and you put in those environments can run in any Kubernetes or any Kafka environment. And when I go to the cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, Google, all I want them to do is run the cluster for me. So you look at them and say, hey, just give me a Kubernetes cluster and I can build my app on top of that. And now I'm reasonably comfortable that if I want to get out of this cloud service provider and go to that cloud service provider, or I want to go across many of the cloud service providers, the software that I build and the systems that I build are able to run on those platforms.
Absolutely. And speaking of open, Yvonne, I would say that Red Hat was part of that open journey very early on as we all went on this cloud computing journey. Tell us about the state of the state at this point. You all are doing a lot of different things over there. Started as sort of this open shift Lego block kind of environment. You've moved yourself way up the value chain these days.
Well, Luke, it was great to hear all of our distinguished government speakers talk about their cloud adoption and the desire to be hybrid. In particular, Shane, because I've personally worked very closely with DHS over my career, and USCIS, they are absolutely innovators in the cloud. In government, and they have a ton of hard-won experiences, developed a great pragmatic approach to cloud that could easily be made agnostic across cloud vendors. So really great to hear their story and the progress they've made over the past decade. Now, obviously, the DoD has never had the luxury to be able to think of cloud as just one thing, right? One vendor, but also just, one delivery mechanism. So they deploy in the most challenging circumstances in the world, and so they've always had to think outside of the box. To your point, Red Hat's goal has always been to support the notion of open hybrid cloud by making sure that Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a first-class citizen in every vendor's cloud implementation. Linux is really truly the foundation of the cloud, and also with an agnostic approach to everything. So automation technologies like Ansible, which can automate regardless of what technology you're trying to connect with, and also with its CNCF compliant Kubernetes implementation, that's OpenShift. So that runs across every infrastructure type from cloud to edge. Tactical edge with cloud capability delivered OCONUS is really a big priority for Red Hat to figure out how we support our customer in that fashion. But we've also partnered with all the cloud vendors in JWCC to help facilitate the procurement of Red Hat technologies in cloud marketplaces. So both pay as you go as well as reserved instance. So try to lower the barrier to entry for adoption for some of these agencies. And to David's point about open platforms, we are working especially closely with both AWS and Microsoft to provide jointly managed services. And these offerings for the Kubernetes platforms are at different classification levels to support both the DoD and DHS mission.
So important, and that's a delicate balance, and very interesting concepts there that have turned into real world implementation. So we certainly do appreciate everything that Red Hat has done for the community. Dr. Lucas, I'm going to ask you, we always like to talk about a specific program that you'd like to shine a light on, where you've taken some of this technology and sort of unlock some capability there. You want to bring one of those to our attention?
Yes, sir. And it's always great to give credit where credit's due, Luke, especially to the amazing work that both federal employees and contractors are doing for Homeland Security. So, I mentioned previously that the migration out of our data center, where we moved the majority of our workloads to cloud service provider environments. So as a part of that, that was in part successful because of some foundational work that our organization has done to set up a program that we now call Headquarters Cloud that gives us the ability to allow application rationalization, meeting with stakeholders, and effective migration to whatever cloud service provider environment that they need to go to based on the risks and a number of things in the decision-making process. So that gave the stakeholders the option, one option for migrating from our data center to the cloud. And as a result of that entity, here at headquarters, that has improved automation capabilities. There's constant innovation that's happening, DevOps pipelines, and numerous other things that I can mention on this call. Improved communication with both stakeholders and system owners. Improved IT management practices because, as we move from waterfall to agile project management, especially with the sort of things that we do here at Homeland Security, we're able to improve upon those things and improve upon cybersecurity. And last but not least, Luke, I'd like to mention, so one of the things that we've seen, and we know that cloud computing is very complex, especially with the migration. And so what we're doing now is we're creating a combined portal to create an abstraction layer, to use an overused industry term, for the users that want to come into the cloud, so that they can have a one-stop shop, so that improve communication. So whether it's a CIO across the department, or it is a subject matter expert hands-on keyboard, that person knows exactly where to go, what to do, and that increases our collaboration and ability to communicate to the stakeholders. So the Headquarters Cloud is a big piece. Shout out to all the team because they're doing a wonderful job. But that's just one of the many programs that we're working on here at Homeland Security.
Very delighted to hear that. Jonathan, how about at ServiceNow? You highlighted one. I know you've got dozens there. Give us an example of one that you'd like to shine the light on.
Well, speaking more, comprehensively, Luke, I think that the question that always comes back to me, and having been a CIO for a long time, these technologies that we're talking about, how are we using them to drive the mission forward? And I look at what the administration's talking about from customer experience, and the question that always comes is, will this technology advance the mission? And from a customer experience perspective, will it make it easier for someone to interact with the government? Will it make it easier in the immigration case that was mentioned earlier, for someone to apply for a visa? Will it make it simpler for someone at an Army base to report an issue with mold or something like that. So when I think about when I think about it from that frame, I really think about the key elements to this. And so much of it is understanding not just the mission, but how does the work and the data flow through the organization in order to get an outcome. And some of the hardest use cases that we're working on at ServiceNow have really complex workflows, especially in the immigration space. And oftentimes those workflows cut across multiple agencies, and but at the almost universally, it's the same person or similar class of individuals is being impacted by different agencies. So really being able to work across those agencies and understand those multi-agency workflows and how someone is interacting with the government is at the core of so many of the projects that ServiceNow is doing. And we like to position ServiceNow as a platform of platforms, if you will, as a connective tissue across these agencies and workflows. So the data can be connected and someone who's interacting in one place has a consistent experience when they interact in another place. And I think that's one of the real benefits of having a SaaS platform that can rise up above an individual agency's architecture and individual agency's technology stack, because we can reposition this in a way where multiple organizations can interact and have the requirements implemented. So we're doing things like that across the DoD and across the DHS space, and those are key projects for our company.
That level of, I'll repeat the word extraction there. That's
a great word.
It's really important where you're stitching all these things together. Paul, you top-lined a lot of activity that is going on at the Army, and it's just daunting to think about the global footprint and the scale that you all are operating at is impressive. Give us an example of one program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, from a scale perspective, I typically push back on scale and say, hey, we need to have quality first. Like each one of the things that we've talked about that's scaling, right, has started somewhere that showed value. I'll probably lean in honestly with the mission command work, and I'll hit like maybe a different aspect of what it's done for us that truly opens up the opportunity for scale. If you look at the Army, the way that we've addressed scale in the past is everyone gets a big piece of hardware and everyone has to do it. We'll typically field 428 systems that support mission command capabilities. When we talk about our ability to scale, what we saw was every single corps and division had visibility with a actual COP, right? When it came to how they were maneuvering with an exercise that we did just about 9 months ago, simply because of their ability to have network connectivity to a persistent capability running in the cloud. And so I think there's a little bit of a different kind of viewpoint of scale that we need to be looking at when it comes to capability. Is typically the Army and scale is a people and a bit of hardware thing, whereas scale now is a connectivity to information thing, right? The more that you can actually create a mechanism by which people can communicate and collaborate, you're truly addressing scale, even perhaps with a single instance running that's simply designed, to handle the actual load, if you will. The same was even seen when we talk about people with CVR, right? Going all the way back to the start of COVID. And I think this is what opened people's eyes when it came to cloud computing is simply my ability to give you connectivity from a personal device allowed you to be part of the team. Whereas you physically coming to an environment and being able to log into government furnished equipment, or you physically being issued a laptop in order to connect and share, those are long lead times, and those are high constraints. Those are also things that force us to predict the future, right? We want to get the greatest discount possible when we make big bulk hardware purchases. And what that forces us to do is to imagine a future of how many people need access or how many things need to connect. And we typically get that wrong. And so I think the value for something like Mission Command as a service is even with a single instance running designed to handle the load, we had the scale and support of an entire corps and its divisions when it came to actually being able to operate within an exercise. And I think that's a better vignette of scale because it changes the dynamic for literally every single system. that we can possibly field. Think how many one-off local deployments exist at every single data center to run something in a data center where connectivity is an imperative, and you can actually host that as a web-based service for all to consume. You've now essentially broken down the complexity that just never needed to exist there in the first place, and you've opened up opportunity. So I think Mission Command has been a beautiful vignette that's also allowed us to change how we write requirements. We typically were too fixed in our requirements, even with hardware specifications listed because of some challenge when it comes to swap, whereas we now have a greater aperture that we can be looking at. And so this moves from hard requirements to more objectives, metrics that help us understand that we've achieved those objectives, and really giving space for PEOs to work with their customers. We just talked about the customer experience, execution order that came out, like the executive order that came out. Like, we have to be incentivized to care about the customer experience. And so making it so that teams don't look at upstream requirements too hard, but look at downstream engagements with their customers helps make that customer experience even better. And only, in my opinion, drives better value for the mission.
Love the idea of the scale, not only horizontal, which is typically how we look at it, and then talk about vertical is impressive. Yvonne, how about over at Red Hat? Would you like to give us an example that you'd like to shine the light on a program that has unlocked some of this capability for operators?
Well, we're with agencies all across federal, state, and local government in support of their cloud initiatives, but we've heard several people talk today about their shared service strategy. So they're a multi-tenant service that they're providing across the enterprise. And so I'll call out to another example in DoD because I have a ton of respect for Sharon Woods at DISA. A shout out to another woman in technology as well. But I think she has a really thoughtful approach to how she's providing services for the warfighter, which I really love. I think the idea that government has to provide services that are commercially competitive, calling back to just now the conversation about having the customer experience be on par, you really have to run that shared service kind of like a business. You do the market research, you understand where there are capability gaps that you can capitalize on, and really partner with industry to bring that value to DoD. So, for example, if there's a certain service or capability that doesn't exist in a managed fashion, right at the right accreditation level for the DoD or DHS to be able to leverage it, how can government partner with vendors to make that service available and solve a common problem for many, and potentially do it in a way that addresses security issues that may have arisen from doing like bespoke implementations. And so even thinking through like a marketing and outreach plan as part of your shared service, I think that's in those ways, she's very insightful about how she's leading that group. And I look forward to their continued success.
And boy, talk about having to operate at scale is super impressive. All right, we're going to take another short break and we'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.